The autumn rain fell steadily over Riverside Park, turning the cracked pavement into mirrors that reflected the dying light. It was the kind of evening where most people hurried indoors, collars turned up against the cold. But in the corner of the park, near the old bandstand with its peeling paint and rusted railings, a sound cut through the steady drumming of rain. A cry so desperate, so raw, it made the world feel colder than any storm could. "He hit my grandma." The words came from a little girl, no more than 7 years old, her pink raincoat soaked through, her dark hair plastered to her tear-streaked face. She stood there in the rain, trembling, her small fists clenched at her sides, looking at anyone who would listen. But the park was nearly empty. Just a few people walking dogs, heads down, pretending not to hear, not to see. If you believe that silence in the face of cruelty is a choice we can refuse, that ordinary people can become extraordinary when they decide to act, please take a moment to like this video, comment, share, and subscribe to Bike Diaries, where we show the world that courage lives in those who choose to care. The girl's name was Maya. She lived 3 blocks from the park in a narrow apartment above a laundromat where the smell of detergent and dryer sheets mixed with the scent of her grandmother's cooking. Her grandmother, Elena, had raised her since Maya was 2 years old. After her parents died in a car accident she was too young to remember. Elena was everything. Teacher, mother, friend, protector. The woman who braided Maya's hair every morning, who sang old songs in Spanish while cooking, who made the world feel safe even when it wasn't. But tonight, that safety had shattered. Maya had been doing her homework at the kitchen table when she heard the shouting. Her grandmother's boyfriend, a man named Dale, who had moved in 6 months ago, was drunk again. Dale wasn't supposed to drink anymore. That was the promise he'd made when Elena took him in after his wife left him. But promises mean nothing to men who've forgotten how to keep them. The shouting got louder. Maya heard something crash, a plate maybe, or a glass. Then her grandmother's voice, pleading, frightened. Maya dropped her pencil and ran to the living room. What she saw would haunt her. Dale, red-faced and swaying, standing over her grandmother who was on the floor, holding her cheek, blood trickling from her lip. The lamp was knocked over. The coffee table was on its side. "Get up," Dale slurred, reaching for Elena again. That's when Maya screamed. Not words, just a scream that came from somewhere deep and primal, the sound a child makes when their entire world is breaking apart. Dale turned, his eyes unfocused, and for a moment Maya thought he might come for her, too. But her grandmother found her strength then, struggling to her feet, pushing Maya toward the door. "Run, mi amor," Elena whispered, her voice shaking. "Run and get help." Maya ran. Down the narrow stairs, out into the rain, not knowing where to go or who would listen. She ran to the park because it was open, because people were there, because maybe someone, anyone, would care enough to save the person she loved most in the world. But the people in the park just hurried past, embarrassed by her tears, uncomfortable with her pain. One woman pulled out her phone, maybe to call someone, but then put it away and kept walking. A man with an umbrella told her to go home. Maya stood there crying in the rain, feeling more alone than she ever had when she heard it. The sound that would change everything. Thunder, but not from the sky, from the street. The deep, rhythmic roar of motorcycle engines, rolling closer like a storm with purpose. Maya turned toward the sound, wiping rain and tears from her eyes. 5 motorcycles came around the corner, their headlights cutting through the gray evening, water spraying from their tires. They pulled up to the curb near the park entrance, engines rumbling, chrome gleaming even in the dim light. The riders wore black leather vests over their jackets, and even through her tears, Maya could see the patches. Iron Brotherhood, Riverside Chapter, skull designs and crossed wrenches and words she couldn't quite read. These were bikers, the kind of men her grandmother had always told her to avoid, the kind the news said were dangerous. But right now, dangerous was exactly what she needed. The lead rider killed his engine and swung off his bike. He was big, with a thick gray beard and long hair tied back, tattoos covering every inch of his arms. His face was weathered and hard, the kind of face that had seen too much of life's ugly side. His name was Marcus, though everyone in his crew called him Tank, and he'd been riding with the Iron Brotherhood for 23 years. Marcus had stopped at the park to wait for the rain to ease up before heading to the Brotherhood's clubhouse. But when he heard the little girl crying, something in his chest tightened. He knew that sound. He'd made that sound himself, once, a long time ago when he was a boy, and there was no one to help. He walked over to Maya, his boots splashing in puddles, and crouched down in front of her, making himself smaller, less intimidating. The rest of his crew stayed back, silent, watching. "Hey there," Marcus said, his voice gravelly but gentle. "What's wrong, little one?" Maya looked up at him, at this huge man with his scary tattoos and his leather vest, and something in his eyes made her trust him. Maybe it was because he'd stopped when everyone else had walked away. Maybe it was because he looked at her like she mattered. "He hit my grandma," she sobbed, the words tumbling out between gasps. "He's hurting her and nobody will help and I don't know what to do." Marcus's jaw tightened. Behind him, the other riders shifted, tension rippling through the group. One of them, a younger man with a shaved head and a scar across his cheek, muttered something under his breath. Another, an older woman with silver hair and a denim vest over her leather jacket, stepped forward. "Where?" Marcus asked quietly. Maya pointed toward her apartment building, barely visible 3 blocks away. "The laundromat building. We live on top. Please, he won't stop. He's drunk and he's so angry, and my grandma—" She couldn't finish. Fresh sobs choked off her words. Marcus stood slowly, his mind already made up. He'd spent his whole life being judged for what he looked like, for the vest he wore, for the brothers he rode with. Society saw them as thugs, as criminals, as the kind of men you crossed the street to avoid. But the Brotherhood had rules. Real rules. Protect the weak. Stand against bullies. Never turn your back on someone who needs help. And right now, this little girl needed help more than anyone he'd ever seen. He turned to his crew. "Mick, Razor, Bones, Stella, you're with me." He looked back at Maya. "Show us where." Maya nodded, hope flaring in her chest for the first time since she'd run from her apartment. She started walking, almost running, and the 5 bikers followed her, their boots hitting the wet pavement in rhythm, a sound like drums of war. They reached the apartment building in minutes. Maya led them up the narrow staircase, the smell of detergent giving way to the smell of fear as they approached the 2nd floor. The door to her apartment was slightly open, and from inside came the sound of breaking glass and Elena's frightened voice. Marcus held up a hand, stopping Maya at the top of the stairs. "You wait here," he said softly. Then he looked at Stella, the woman with silver hair. "Stay with her." Stella nodded and put a protective arm around Maya's shoulders. Marcus and the other 3 men approached the door. They didn't knock. They didn't announce themselves. Marcus simply pushed the door open and walked in. The apartment was small and neat, or it had been before Dale tore through it. Furniture was overturned. Pictures had been knocked off the walls, and in the kitchen, visible through the doorway, Dale had Elena backed against the counter, his hand raised to strike her again. "Hey," Marcus said, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. Dale spun around, his eyes wild, trying to focus on the four massive figures filling the doorway. For a moment, he just stared, his alcohol-soaked brain struggling to process what he was seeing. 4 bikers, leather-clad and terrifying, standing in his apartment like judgment itself. "Who the hell are you?" Dale slurred, trying to sound tough, but his voice cracked. Marcus didn't answer right away. He just looked at Elena, at the blood on her lip, at the bruise forming on her cheekbone, at the way she held herself like every part of her hurt. His hands curled into fists, but he kept his voice calm. "We're the people that little girl found when she went looking for help," Marcus said, quietly. "The ones who actually showed up?" Behind him, Mick, Razor, and Bones spread out slightly, blocking any escape route. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Their presence was message enough. Dale's bravado flickered. "This is my house. You can't just—" "It's not your house," Mick interrupted, his scarred face emotionless. "And you're done here." Dale looked from one man to another, and something in his face changed. The drunken rage gave way to fear, the kind of fear that comes when a bully realizes he's no longer the strongest person in the room. He lowered his hand, took a step back. "She asked for it," he mumbled, the oldest, weakest excuse in the book. "She wouldn't—" "Stop talking," Marcus said, and there was something in his tone that made Dale's mouth snap shut. "There's nothing you can say that will make this okay. Nothing." He moved closer, not threatening, just inevitable, like a mountain moving. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to pack whatever you need in the next 5 minutes. Then you're going to leave this apartment, and you're never coming back. You're never going to contact Elena again. You're never going to call her, text her, show up at her work, nothing. You're going to disappear from her life like you never existed." Dale tried to protest. "You can't— We're not done," Razor interrupted, stepping forward. He was leaner than Marcus, but somehow more frightening, with cold eyes that had seen too much violence. "If we hear that you've bothered her, if we hear you've even driven past this building, we'll come back, and next time, we won't be this polite." The threat hung in the air, heavy and real. Dale looked at Elena, maybe searching for support, for her to tell these men to leave. But Elena just stared at him with something that looked like disappointment and relief mixed together. 5 minutes, Marcus repeated. "Starting now." Dale scrambled. He grabbed a duffel bag from the closet and started throwing clothes into it, his hands shaking. The bikers watched in silence, a wall of judgment and barely contained anger. When Dale tried to take a photo from the mantel, a picture of him and Elena from happier times, Bones shook his head. "Leave it." Dale dropped the frame and kept packing. 3 minutes later, his bag was full, and his hands were empty of excuses. He moved toward the door, giving the bikers a wide berth, and Marcus followed him out into the hall. Maya and Stella stood at the top of the stairs, watching. When Dale saw Maya, he opened his mouth, maybe to apologize, maybe to make one last excuse, but Marcus put a hand on his shoulder, firm and final. "Don't," he said simply. Dale looked at the little girl whose grandmother he'd hurt, at the woman who'd given him a chance he'd thrown away, and then he stumbled down the stairs and out into the rain. They heard his car start a moment later, the engine revving too hard, tires squealing as he drove away into the night. The silence that followed felt like a wound beginning to heal. Marcus turned back to the apartment. Maya had already run inside, throwing herself into her grandmother's arms. Elena held her tight, tears streaming down her face, murmuring in Spanish, words of love and relief and apology for not protecting her better. Stella followed Marcus back into the apartment. The men had already started cleaning up, righting furniture, picking up broken glass. It wasn't part of any plan. It's just what you do when you see someone who needs help. Elena looked up at Marcus, still holding Maya, her voice thick with emotion. I don't know how to thank you. Don't, Marcus said, kneeling down so he was eye level with them. Your granddaughter did all the hard work. She was brave enough to ask for help. That takes more courage than anything we did. He looked at Maya. You saved your grandma tonight. You know that, right? Maya nodded, still crying, but these were different tears now. Relief. Release. The tears that come when the worst is over and you're still standing. Stella had found the first aid kit under the bathroom sink. She sat down beside Elena and started gently cleaning the cut on her lip, working with practiced hands. We should call someone, she said quietly. Police, or at least get you checked out at the hospital. Elena hesitated, the old fear of making things official, of getting authorities involved. But then she looked at Maya, at her granddaughter who'd been so brave, and she nodded. Yes, you're right. Mick had already pulled out his phone. I'll call. I know some good people on the force. They'll make sure this gets documented, get a restraining order in place. While they waited for the police, the bikers stayed. Marcus sat at the kitchen table with Maya, asking her about school, about her favorite subjects, about the drawing she'd been working on for art class. Normal questions, human questions, the kind that remind a scared child that the world can be kind again. Bones found a broom and swept up the glass. Razor fixed the coffee table leg that had broken. Stella made tea, moving around Elena's kitchen like she'd been there 100 times, finding the cups and the sugar and making the space feel safe again. When the police arrived, they took statements, photographs, documented everything. The responding officers knew Marcus and his crew. There was history there, not all of it simple, but respect on both sides. The sergeant, a woman named Patterson with tired eyes and gray streaks in her hair, thanked them for the call. You did the right thing, she told Elena, and we'll make sure he can't come back. After the police left, after the restraining order was filed, and Elena's injuries were treated by the paramedics who came to check on her, the bikers prepared to leave. It was late now, past 10, and the rain had finally stopped. The city looked clean in the aftermath, washed and new. Marcus stood in the doorway, ready to go, when Maya ran up to him. She held out a piece of paper, a drawing she'd made while they were waiting. It showed 5 motorcycles and a little girl in a pink raincoat, and above it, written in careful letters, "Thank you for being heroes." Marcus took the drawing, his throat suddenly tight. He'd been called a lot of things in his life: thug, criminal, outlaw, dangerous. But hero, that was new. We're just people who showed up, he said, his voice rough. Same as anyone should. But Maya shook her head, wise beyond her years. Not everyone does, though. You did. Elena came to the door, standing behind her granddaughter, her hand resting on Maya's shoulder. How can I repay you? You can't, Stella said gently. And you don't need to. Just take care of yourself and this brave girl. That's enough. Marcus handed Elena a business card, worn and creased from his wallet. If he comes back, if you need anything, you call that number. Day or night. Someone will answer. Elena took the card, holding it like a lifeline. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for seeing her, for hearing her, for caring. The bikers made their way back downstairs, their boots echoing in the stairwell. The neighborhood was quiet now, just the sound of water dripping from gutters and the distant hum of traffic. They mounted their motorcycles, engines rumbling to life, and for a moment they sat there, 5 riders who'd stopped to help because that's what their brotherhood was really about. Marcus looked up at the apartment window. Maya and Elena stood there, waving. He raised a hand in return, then revved his engine once. Not a threat, a promise. A reminder that help can come from unexpected places. They rode off into the night, their taillights disappearing around the corner, leaving behind a little girl who would grow up knowing that courage comes in all forms, that heroes don't always look the way you expect, and that sometimes the people society fears are the very ones who will stand between you and harm. If this story reminded you that real strength isn't about how loud you are or how much you can hurt, but about how you choose to protect those who can't protect themselves, please like, share, and subscribe to Bike Diaries, where we believe that true courage begins with compassion. Before you go, comment below. When was the last time you stopped to help someone, even when it was inconvenient? Because sometimes one moment of courage can change everything. Sometimes the person you help today might be the child who changes the world tomorrow. And remember, when a child cries for help, the measure of our humanity is in how we answer.